Hello, this is Philip Carr-Gomm. Welcome to Tea with the Druid 193, brought to you by the Order of Bards, Advaits and Druids. It's lovely to see everybody arriving from Ulster and Denmark and Illinois and Spain and Kentucky and Lincolnshire and Crouch End and Pennsylvania and Delaware and West Yorkshire. Hooray, great to see everybody arriving in the forest clearing on this October evening. Sweden and Texas too. Great to see you. Okay, so and Pamela from New York on the other side of the world. From not New York, Wellington in New Zealand. Lovely to see you. So just take a moment, check in, and just give a snapshot of how you're feeling. Just type in a word or two to say how you feel. You might be feeling full of beans, you might be feeling tired, whatever it is. It's a kind of nice way for us to be together, just to share a bit. And meanwhile, while you do that, I'm going to talk a little bit. And it's October, and I was tuning in to what I should talk about today, and I looked across my desk and came across this card that's one of my favorites from the Druid Animal Oracle of the salmon, with the hazelnut of wisdom falling down there. And I became aware of how October is the time that these North Atlantic salmon start returning to their spawning grounds. This extraordinary act that takes place in the North Atlantic. I watched a few little videos, they're wonderful to watch on YouTube of salmon jumping upstream, the way and getting back to their spawning grounds. They can leap up to 3 meters. And this got me thinking about one of the core dynamics in spirituality, in life itself, at the heart of Druidry. I think you find it at the heart of Taoism, perhaps at the heart of all spirituality. And I thought it would be great to explore that idea with you. And even though it might sometimes sound abstract, in fact, it's a tremendously practical concept that we're working with. What it's about really is about the tension that exists and the relationship that exists between control and surrender. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in a very practical sense, one of the hardest things to figure out, or one of the challenges that we're often faced with, is to what degree do I control things? Do I plan? Do I strategize? Do I use my intention to achieve something? And to what degree do I surrender? And when life is flowing, we move from being directive to being open and surrendering in a kind of natural flow. But it doesn't always work like that. And sometimes there's this real challenge about having to decide whether we should go with the flow, relax, let go, surrender, be open to the what is, and to what degree do we actually push forward. So this is a very specific, practical issue that we're often faced with. And we find it right at the heart, for instance, of the AA movement in thinking of the serenity prayer. You know, the way the serenity prayer begins. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And that's it, the wisdom to know the difference. At some level, we're talking about yin and yang and the dance between the two. So let me just look. I see everybody's relaxed, drained, confused, rushed, autumnally content, frazzled. Work was exhausting. Chilly. Yes, it's getting chilly these days. Sad. The lovely autumn weather ended. It was raining the whole day. Yes. This morning I dreamed a Halloween dream. It must be autumn. Yes, we're getting towards that time, aren't we? Samhain coming up. So yes. So this dance between surrendering and pushing forward. And of course, a big part, I think, of learning to be effective in the world and to lead a fulfilling advice is understanding the power of intention, the power of goal setting. It's a huge piece to get a hold of if you can study that. That's what Lessons in Magic, the course that I do, and lots of people work with these ideas of setting goals. Intention, it's the magic wand after all. Deciding what you want, having an intention. And often, sometimes when that gets too predominant, it can start to produce its own problems, which is why I think, when people say that you should always do a meditation with an intention, or you should always start a ceremony with intention, where they stress that there always has to be intention. My sense with that is no. Sometimes it's true that setting intention is really important, but not setting intention is important too. Because whilst we hope that it's coming from beyond our egos, or that our ego is aligned with our values, and therefore we can set our intentions, we know that at some level that those intentions are often coming from the ego, and they may well be aligned with our values, and they may well be just what we need, but perhaps they're not. And the advantage of not working with intention, with not being intentional, is that you allow something greater to come in. You either allow the Arwen to arise in Druid terms. You open to the power of the collective. You open to the spirit of the times. You open to what is needed, and you open to relationship too, you see, and these aren't just all thoughts around just one's own personal life and success and all the rest of it, because this is what relationship is too. In relationship with somebody else, sometimes we need to be intentional and clear and direct, sometimes stating boundaries firmly and so on. And other times we need to be completely open, with no agenda, with no intention, just being open to the other. The risk with that is we can be swamped, or our boundaries can be violated. The risk with being overly intentional is that we can be dominating and not empathic. So somehow we have to work out this relationship between these two dynamics within ourselves and within life. And it's so interesting because this basic dance applies to relationship, to making love itself, to the act of creativity. And anyone engaged in the creative process will know how subtle that is and how fine that balance is. If you become too intentional when you're writing, it starts to lose its juice, because it's coming from the left brain, if you like. It's becoming too pedestrian and too controlled. If you open up fully, it's a really interesting experience to do when you're creative. I'm sure this must apply to sort of painting and the arts, but it certainly applies to writing, is to practice writing with no agenda and just letting it pour through. And it's really freeing and creative, but it's really hard to write a book like that. I mean, it's really hard because it just spills all over the place. So you need some of that left brain structure. You need some intention into it. So there's this dance all the time between these two. Does this all make sense? Let's see. Erin, too much in control doesn't provide the breath needed for true creativity, Arwen, to enter in. Yes, absolutely. Hyper-intention gives me the cramps when I'm being creative. Yes, exactly. So I think the magician, the mystic, everybody actually, even kids in learning how to negotiate life, I think this should be, they do that thing, I've forgotten what it's called, personal skills training or something like that, where they teach young people how to kind of negotiate their way through life. I think this is a central skill that should be taught, really. Psychologist called Richard Cohen came across this very interesting finding when he examined self-actualized people who are highly creative and successful, is that they had an ability to be intensely focused and also totally open as well, which is sort of saying the same thing: focused, directional, the wand, open, the chalice. Agatha Velvet, good points about the balance of that sweet spot. It really is a sweet spot, isn't it? One way is to give yourself the freedom, if you can, to go really strongly in one direction and then the other, almost experimentally. So, try being really intentional, try letting go and surrendering completely, And this whole period of the pandemic has been interesting, hasn't it? Because it's allowed us to sort of, I think, perhaps to play with this, because suddenly the parameters changed so much, and you could spend the whole day just sitting on the sofa being unintentional, or you could be really intentional and set out on a hike and be very directed and so on. So let's all ask ourselves the question now: how do you know? Let's come up with some ideas about how do you know when to shift from direction to surrender? Let's all ask ourselves that question. How do you work that out? How do you come to that decision? And then if something comes to you, just do jot it down and share it with us. I'd say academic deadlines are pretty motivating for a student. Yes, exactly. When you're writing deadlines are hugely helpful because they give you a focus. When you get stuck, change and surrender. James Turner, you recognize the moment. Yes, the sort of longer you live and the longer you're sensitive, I think, to that, James. And you're a great musician, I know. So it's the creative. The more you're involved in creativity, you just recognize when you have to make that shift. Still my heart and listen within, from Elizabeth. Yes, exactly. Maybe it's not something a feeling, says Alice. It's not something we necessarily get with the mind. It's not something you get a feeling in the heart. When I feel like I'm up against a wall and all my planning is either ineffective or making things worse. Right. I will try to surrender when I approach my paints tomorrow, says Healing Heart. Great. Yes, I'd be interested to know how that goes. Julia Foyle, taking a breath and getting outside in nature, just changing state, as Cheryl says, changing state. And that's, of course, the value of all these things we do, meditation, breathing, getting out into nature, reading, not getting stuck, because there's a way in which we're creatures of habit, and we're also creatures who are easily hypnotized. We can easily get onto one level of consciousness. You know, when that's why the internet can be addictive. That's why addictions can be addictive. That's where we can get stuck in one mode. And I guess we probably all start to experience this when we're young, when we're sort of, I don't know, doing homework for school or something like that. And you keep trying to push through and push through. And at some point, your mind just gives up, and you know, and you have to surrender to it because you're tired. And then you have a little snooze, or you distract yourself in some way, and you come back and you can begin again. Either your mind, or as Lorna suggests, your body, when the body says no more. Yes, exactly. Even says, if I stay open long enough, eventually some thoughts will form, giving or demanding direction. Yes, it's like analogy that comes to me is a sort of strange one, really, a holding pattern. You know, in aircraft, when they stack, they go into what's called a holding pattern. So you're coming to the airport, there are too many aircraft to land all at once. So they stack maybe 4 or 5 aircraft at different heights in the sky, and they're in a holding pattern. And you go round, and it's very odd if you're a passenger, because you keep going round and round and round like that. And then the control tower says, you know, come in number 3, you know, and then you drop down and you land. So something about that's not a very good analogy, is it? But it's you know, it's something about being in a holding pattern, just holding, waiting for inspiration, and then the inspiration comes. Yes. So, okay, so what I'm going to suggest now is, let's just see one more. When making jewelry, I will choose the color stones, for example, jade. Then I give myself the option to use what metals or other colors to use, but it must remain mainly jade. Right. I procrastinate too much, waiting till the last minute. I feel so much better when I take charge and accomplish my goals. Well, that's interesting, you see, isn't it? Because, and this is what I mean about it being a very practical and specific thing. You know, this can sound very abstract, but it's actually really practical, because, you know, if we're not proactive, if we're not intentional, then we can just drift, we blob out. And it's like, how long do we allow ourselves to do that? You know, and for some of us, it's really hard, because it has momentum. It's hypnotic. It has momentum. We get stuck on one level of consciousness, and then we have to kind of really make efforts to pull ourselves out. And I think the ideal, in a way, one of the reasons why we follow a spiritual path or follow spiritual practices, is to develop a kind of fluency and a flexibility. So we move in and out, so we don't get caught in procrastination or getting stuck either in being overly directive and active, or being overly passive. Should we go into a meditation and let's explore that in the breath. I'm going to read a poem, which I'm not even sure if it directly relates to this, but I want to read it. And here we go. It's by my favorite poet at the moment, Frank LaRue Owen. And here it goes. And as I read the poem, do feel free to kind of start entering into the meditative state, and then I'll go straight into the meditation once I've read it. The poem is called Golden by Frank LaRue Owen. This rising up each day and walking when the world is so heavy is a test of any heart-mind awake to itself. Heart-mind awake to itself. Holding your breath won't do, dear one. Don't block the seed-carrying winds traveling over your inner mountain. There are cold, calculating forces, spin doctors and spellcasters who would enslave your life force. Everything they stand for, right down to their livelihood, seeks to freeze the river of warmth inside you. Don't allow the sorcerers to win. Don't give them your precious attention. Launch an active rebellion against their trances instead. Embody your golden embodiment. You are golden, and the golden sunshine of tomorrow awaits you. Keep your eyes open so you can truly see it all unfold. Even this morning, I bet you didn't notice all the flecks of gold falling off of you as you moved between the worlds. Remember, you are golden. And as golden beings, let's find ourselves in the sacred grove now. Surrounded by beautiful trees with golden leaves, turning golden in the autumn. And it feels so comforting and so good to be in the grove. We feel the support of our fellow companions, seated in this circle, merging with the trees, feeling at one with the trees that are rooted so deep in the earth. And taking in a deep breath, you'll hold it for a moment and then breathe out fully and deeply, becoming aware of being seated on the ground and feeling the energy of the earth beneath you. And you sense all the life in the earth, the soil, the rocks, all the creatures living in the earth, all the moisture in the earth. And you feel all this earth energy flowing up into your body, bringing energy and vitality to you. And you sense your brothers and sisters, the trees around you, and you sense how they are rooted deep in the soil. And you feel them pulling up the energy of this soil, of this earth. This energy flowing up through their roots, up their trunks, and into their branches and leaves. And you sense the golden and green leaves, and the blue sky above, and the light of the sun. And you breathe in the purity and the clarity of the sky. And you breathe this energy of the element of air into your being. And the energy of the sky meets the energy of the earth within the very center of yourself. And you become aware of your breath now. Just becoming aware of your breathing, not necessarily trying to change it in any way at all. Breathing in through the nose if you can, and out through the mouth. Allowing your breathing to find its own natural rhythm. And you might like to sense that as you breathe in, you're opening to the world. You're surrendering as you breathe in, as the outer world rushes into you. The air from outside flowing into your being. And as you breathe out, you're acting in the world. You are acting upon the world as you push the air out into the world. surrendering, opening, and then acting, being intentional in the world. And if you notice that as you breathe in and you hold your breath just for a moment, you then make a decision as to when to act. In other words, when to breathe out. So try doing that. Try breathing in, and on the in-breath, hold, and then decide when to breathe out. Perhaps this is why it's so peaceful, lying by the seashore, sensing the waves coming in and going out. And then letting go of any thoughts around this and just enjoying the process of breathing. And then coming to an awareness of being in the sacred grove and perhaps sensing your colleagues around you. This wonderful way in which people from all over the world are gathered together in this circle. A sense of lightness and of warmth, of us all being golden. The flecks of gold just falling off of us as we move between the worlds. And with this sense of gold dust and of light lingering with us, just gradually allow your awareness of being in the sacred grove to fade as you become aware of being seated in front of your computer, your screen, fully present, here and now. And when you feel ready, you open your eyes. And maybe as a way of grounding, just type in a word or two to describe how you feel. And I'm going to type in the link where you can find that poem and more poems. There's the link. Lovely. So that I find that's quite a nice meditation to do, and just breathing in and letting go, but also being aware of the fact that I'm also being active in the world. Because if you think about it, the act of breathing is deliciously liminal. On the one hand, it's completely involuntary. We can surrender to it completely. We don't have to think about it. It's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So just let go. It happens without any effort at all. But you can bring effort into it. And then effort and no effort can coexist, which is another way of talking about that topic that we started exploring today. Effort and no effort, and the dance between the two. And one can find that dance in the very act of breathing itself. And by making it conscious, we can perhaps benefit in this dance more fully. Perhaps we can also develop our strengths and our abilities to move between effort and no effort more. So many, many blessings to you. Have a lovely week. Lots and lots of love. And I shall make a cup of tea and then come back and read all the comments. Okay. Bye, everybody.